Welcome, everyone. This is a Collective Sweat Detroit dance event, teaching with the times, reflecting on the work and role of embodied education. Collective Sweat is an artist organization providing dance classes, artist residencies, and other programming to the Detroit dance community, and our participants often reach the broader Southeast Michigan dance community. So that's where we'll center our discussion and focus today. And we're excited to be here. My name is Audrey, and I'll give a little bit of intro. I mean, I know everyone in this room, but I'm Audrey. I'm going to do a little bit more intro, and then Maddie will talk about some agreements. We'll do some introductions, and we'll get into discussion. So a couple more things. So these spaces are for our community. So like I said, we'll have a panel discussion in the first half, and then in the second half is for group discussion. So we encourage you to take notes, ask questions, share your experiences, participate in the chat as and how you feel comfortable. I know we're all coming in from different parts of the day, and so do what you need for yourself. And then lastly, we always encourage a conversation space that supports a world that we want to be in. So in some easy words, move forward, move back, give space, take space. So if your voice hasn't been in the room a lot, we welcome you to share. And if you feel like your voice has been in the room a lot, we welcome you to take a moment back, etc. So doing so in sort of a balancing act. And I'm going to pass it over to Maddie, who's going to talk through a couple agreements and Zoom logistics.
Yes, hi, I'm Maddie. I'm going to put our online space agreements in the chat right now, which is a document that you saw when you registered, and it just sort of goes into detail about like kind of what we hope to have, the kind of ways we're gonna, be in this space, which is like nice. Where are my notes? Yeah, the space agreements, just to name that we value privacy and presence and respect. We are also, on that note, recording this forum for community archival purposes. So this will be on the CSD website. And if at any time something that you say you don't want to be included into this public recording, you can let us know before or after you speak. So I'll take a note to like cut this from the recording or in the chat, or you can also email us after the fact and just like kind of let us know what you'd like us to redact, and that's collectivesweatdetroit@gmail.com. You can also have your camera on or off at any time. We encourage you to keep your camera on if you feel comfortable, because that makes us all feel like we're in the same room, even though we're not. And when you're not speaking, please have your microphone muted. And if you need any help with Zoom functions, let me know, Maddie, the CSD person. There's a little CSD in my name. And lastly, there are closed captions. They're through Zoom, so they're not perfect. They're auto-generated. And if you'd like to see them, you should just be able to click a button called CC Live Transcription on the bottom of your Zoom panel, and then you should be able to choose whether they're on or off. And if you need any help with that, go ahead and let me know. And I'm going to kick it back to Audrey. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Maddie. Can everyone hear me all right? I know there's some street sounds. Okay, cool. So I want to give a little bit of an introduction to our wonderful panelists, Erika Red Stowall and Marianne Cox, who are both Detroit artists and educators, and they will be leading us in our panel discussion. And so welcome to the space. We're grateful for you here. And I also wanted to give a little context to how we started to think about this forum topic. And so as dance artists involved in holding, taking, and teaching classes, we were curious to be in discussion with other teaching artists and just folks who are interested in dance and taking dance classes to check in on how have our practices shifted, changed, modified, and adapted in these times, this whole pandemic life, and whatever this time is now. And so like adapting to Zoom and the limits of being in person was like one layer to our questions, but we were also curious about sort of more impacts around like how has the why for why we teach dance shifted or morphed, and how can we continue these adaptations moving forward? What feels important right now teaching? How can we learn from other styles and other teachers, from inside studios to not inside of studios, street styles that are already taking place? And how can we find just new ways to commune given where we are in space right now? So that's a little bit of how we started thinking about this discussion. And so I'm excited to see where this goes. I'm gonna pass it over to Teresa to go over the format one more time, which we kind of went over, so I don't know if we need to say it again, and then we'll do a group check-in.
Yeah, just to reiterate, hi, I'm Teresa, also known as Tree, another CSD organizer. And today we're essentially going to have a conversation between myself, a self-appointed CSD person, and between Erika and Marianne, and just kind of format it as three people having a casual conversation. I have a list of questions, some things that we've all been thinking about and brooding over, and we'll go through those as best as we can in the time that we have. And then we'll take a little bit of a 5-minute break if we feel that we need it. And then we're going to open it up to the whole group. So we'll post some extra questions that we can be thinking about. If you have been taking notes and you have any specific questions for any one person or just the group in general to throw out there, we'd be happy to hear those as well. We can do those live. You can speak and take your microphone on or off mute, or you can do it through the chat as well. So if you want to type things in the chat, Maddie will be reading the chat consistently and she can speak whatever is in there that we need. So that's about it. Pass it back.
All right, we're going to check in. So we'd love to take a moment to greet each other and get to know each other a little bit, since we'll be in conversation space. So I would like us to go around, we'll say our names, we'll say pronouns, and we'll say a little bit of maybe where you're at in teaching, learning. So like maybe how you're coming to this conversation, if you like. And then last prompt is to say a movement that we can all reflect back. So an example would be like, well, actually, I'll just check in as the example and then we'll pass it over. So my name's Audrey. I use she, her pronouns, and I was teaching on Zoom for a long time and then was like, I can't do this anymore. So I've taken a break from teaching, but I'm excited to get back into a more frequent practice that might take place in parks more. And my movement for today is like this. So you can do it too if you like. And I'm going to pass it on. And if you don't feel like sharing, if you don't feel like being on camera, you can just either type that in the chat and describe the movement, or you can just unmute and say pass. So you don't have to intro if you don't want to. So how about I pass it to Erika?
Thank you. Hi, my name is Erika Red Stowall. I was teaching virtually for a semester and a half, and it was both physically and mentally exhausting. I've been back in the building. I'm in my office right now for a week and a half. And everyone is just getting used to the routine of it all. So I think I'm excited and curious at the same time of what that's going to look like. The fear has not set in yet, but it's also not, December yet. That's usually when it's like, ooh. And I think my movement is this. Simply because I'm still kind of tired. It's a little knot of the head and everything. And I will pass that to Tree.
I apologize in advance. I have barking dogs in the background, so I will try to speak quickly for the moment. I'm an adjunct professor at Oakland University, and so I've did a lot of virtual teaching since the beginning of 2020. We are back in person right now this semester. So yeah, learned a lot, and that was a lot of chaos. I'm gonna I don't know what to do with my movement, so I'm going to do this, like that awkward, what do I do with my hands kind of thing. Yeah, that's what I'm going to tell you. Oh, goodness. I will pass it to Carlos.
I'm sorry, did you say me? Oh, okay. I'm not sure if I'm set up in kind of a loud place. It's kind of tuning in, so I'll just type anything.
Awesome. While you're doing that, I can bop it to Marianne in the meantime. Perfect.
Sure. Hi, Marianne. She, her. Let's see. I started doing virtual teaching like, I don't even know when it was now, March 2020, and that lasted throughout all of last year's season. So about a full year plus a few months. And then I've been on leave, just had a little one in June. So I've been not working for the past 3 months at all, which has been really interesting. I haven't done that in 20 years. So going back, I also actually last year taught in a private studio as well in person for the whole year. And that was kind of a hybrid. We had people in and out that were virtual. So I've had a little bit of experience of both throughout the past year and a half. I agree with you all. For the virtual teaching is, and we'll speak more on that later, but that has been the bigger challenge. And I guess going back, yeah, where am I at right now? We're still adapting. So looking forward to probably having more in-person modified. Who knows if a virtual will come back? But yeah, kind of waiting to see. I go back to work next month and jump right back in. So I'm glad to be here. Nice to see you all. And I can pass it to, I'll pass it to Maddie. Or Carlos, if Carlos wanted to take his turn, you're welcome to.
Here, why don't I read, Carlos put it in the chat and I'll read it aloud and then I'll go. Carlos is coming from the in-between, and Carlos has been doing guest speaking on multimedia and has been doing Aikido as their practice since there were hiring freezes. There are hiring freezes currently, yet fall 2022 is looking promising. Would you like to do a movement, Carlos, and then we'll all mirror it back to you? You can not if you don't want to. But you're good. Okay. Okay, my name is Maddie, and they, them pronouns are just my name. I don't really have a teaching practice and haven't for a long time, but I have been learning a lot of new things over the past phase. And one of those has been taking online classes for ASL. So I've been learning ASL online, which has been really engaging, but like my experience as a mover taking online movement classes has been a little bit like tenuous and complicated. So like I have like those two different experiences of online learning of like a movement based form, which is interesting. I've also been learning how to sew, which has been a very physical and visceral challenge somehow, and very emotional. Oh, and my movement will be this. And Em, would you like to intro check-in verbally or in the chat?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I loved that movement. Hi, everybody. My name is Em Lane. I go by she, her pronouns. I am not a professional dancer by any sort, but I do know Audrey and have enjoyed dancing with Audrey casually. So I've never taught online like that, but I do work in visual art and as an administrator, and a lot of my approach to that is trying to facilitate learning in ways that aren't punitive and are collective. I hope this is answering the question. One thing I've also been learning as well is I recently adopted a dog. I've had him for a couple months, and just becoming kind of learning that relationship. And so my movement is going to be based off him. He's very shy, but when he gets excited, he slaps his paw on the ground. So y'all won't be able to see it. You'll be able to hear it, but I'm going to slap my leg. So we can all do that together. Thank you for having me. I'll pass it on to Dominique.
Hey everyone, it's almost 12 a.m. here, so my camera will be off. I'm in bed. But I just wanted to like show up and check in and see how everyone was doing in this beautiful org in Detroit. And I go by he, him. I'm pulling up the chat again to read the prompt. I come into this conversation kind of scattered. We moved into a new flat today, so I'm completely out of it, but I'm present. And movement, I think just like my heart is beating and breathing. I think that's all I got at this very moment. But I'm so happy to see everyone's face and to catch up and to listen.
Amazing. Thanks everyone for sharing just where you're at right now and sharing yourselves into the space and being down to be here. It's really great. I'm gonna pass it on to Tree for our discussion. So thanks for checking in, everybody, and that's all you have.
Just to state again, this is really just structured as a casual conversation. So feel free to be eating or drinking anyone and, check, zooming in and out with your screens, however you see fit. And then when we get through a certain amount of our questions, hopefully we'll have enough time for them. We'll open it up and we can have a really big group discussion. But yeah, Marianne, Erika, let's kick it off. So we already shared a little bit about yourselves and what you do and the teaching that you've kind of endured over the last year and a half. But would you mind maybe going a little deeper? So where exactly have you been teaching? How has the virtual lifestyle been incorporated at just school? I mean, like a school context, a studio context. Yeah, just whenever you're ready. Just a little bit more elaboration, please.
Well, I am a full-time educator with Detroit Public Schools Community District. That's their whole title. I am a dance instructor at Martin Luther King High School. I teach 9th to 12th grade. So I remember the exact date because it was Friday the 13th.
Nice.
So March 12th, 2019, they did a robocall and informed all kids not to come to school on Friday. And that we were going to suspend school for about a week, I think it was, until we could get a grasp and understand what was actually happening. But all teachers were to report on Friday. And on Friday, we came in and pretty much they was like, clean up your rooms and we will see you guys in a week. So we were unplugging stuff, getting stuff together to teach virtually. And then when Monday hit, they were pretty much like, we're not returning back into the schools until the fall. And then when the fall came, it got extended for the whole year. So I've been teaching 9th through 12th grade, which is a mixture in each class. from my 3 beginner classes, my intermediate and advanced class got all put together as one for about a year and a half. And that first, I want to say 4 months, the kids were not coming into class because it was released by Governor Whitmore that they were going to pass on to the next grade, regardless of if they attended school or not. So I would pretty much come online every day from my 8 o'clock to my 4:20 time span and just sit there in silence and just hope that a kid may or may not pop in. When September hit, it's when it was like, okay, all kids need to be in the classroom. They need to be paying attention and they need to be alert. But we had set a precedence in the earlier couple of months that we would be passing them on anyway. So it was a very slow start. And then it was very difficult to have certain behaviors change. Students actually being in the classroom, which was their homes, and not being in vehicles, at work, in the grocery store. They was just all over the place. So I would have kids call in and I would say, turn on your camera. And then they would turn on their camera and they have a whole McDonald's uniform on. And I was like, okay, so we're not dancing today. So it was extremely difficult. They became lax in their work, I think, over that time when we just completely passed them along, and trying to get some form of a routine and some form of a plan for my class was very difficult because I was adjusting constantly. I felt like a constant moving piece on a chessboard. Like I just was trying not to get my king taken. I was just constantly. So it was the situation with that. It was the situation of seniors, because I'm at a high school, seniors losing proms, graduations, and all those events that happen senior year. And then there was also issues of depression and kids being stuck in the house constantly, other kids taking on more responsibility that they're in the home. So they were assisting with their younger siblings as well and not really being able to concentrate on their own assignments. I would love to say there's a success story in here, but I do have one. A couple of my students actually did much better with virtual education. They didn't have the distractions of the school. One of my students passed with like a 4.5 GPA. I didn't even know that was possible. But she found it to be so much more easier to be online, but the majority of my students struggled. I struggled as well. And I'll pass it along.
I'm glad to hear there was some success stories though throughout all of that. And I will say I cannot totally relate, but I know some of my colleagues at the university can relate to students showing up virtually in random places. For a dance class, one of my colleagues had a student show up on an airplane, decided to take a vacation because they could be wherever they wanted, but they logged in and they were on video Zoom on an airplane. Another one who kept drinking during class, like drinking alcohol, and like would kept reaching out of the screen and like taking sips of their beverage, putting it back, standing up, doing pliés, go back, and like drinking on camera. Anyway, lots of stories. Marianne, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, no, let's see. So with the living arts, so that is, sorry, my brain. Teaching in 2 different places. So with living arts, the portion that I am in charge of was the after school arts program. So dance classes, community dance classes that take place after school, typically like in a studio setting, but we're not a private dance studio. So that, and I've been with them for many years. To give some context, it's kind of been my main gig, and I've grown with them over the years. And then I guess let me start with that. I feel like I have 2 different worlds I've been experiencing in this past year. So with living arts, and I think partially what I had been going through, I took over as dance director. I've been a teacher there for 13 years now, and helping direct the dance program for about 5. So being with them and trying to help it grow and become bigger and better and trying to do all these things that we kind of were hitting a lot of roadblocks in the years leading up to COVID, trying to be bigger than I think was even really capable. But so we were getting somewhere with things. And then, yeah, COVID shut down. That was in March as well. And like you said, Erika, I remember us thinking like, oh, this is going to be 2 weeks, and then we'll come back and we'll take a look at whether we could be back or not. So that aspect. And then with Living Arts, the youth, it's anywhere kids 2 to high school age. The kids I was working with mainly last year were teens, and then the youngest like 7 to 10-year-olds. And then also I've taught at private studios throughout my my teaching experience, and I also was at another private studio when the shutdown happened. With them, we just shut down and went virtual from March through the end of the season in June. And that was just regular classes, same schedule, same everything, after school, online. With that, I guess it's a little more cut and dry I think with a lot more private studios, kind of just adapted to virtual classes. They did a show outside, so they rented a stage. So there was still, or actually the show was extended till September. So we were off for a while, and then we got back together and we're teaching outside in person to prepare for the outside show. And I know even some of those students still got to do their competitions, which were modified. So not much changed too much besides that few months of totally virtual. And then just shows looking different, but still kids being able to perform and use their costumes even that they paid for. Still being able to compete and do their senior solos, etc. Even though that looked a little bit different. And then at that studio from September through this past June, we were in person the whole time with modifications, masks, spacing, anyone sick is online, not coming to class if they were in contact with anything. Pretty much all the safety precautions that I think we're all kind of used to at this point. And then they even had an indoor show. So that experience was different, but still kind of trying to hold on to some normalcy. And I did witness the kids in that program and other studios get to maintain training. They got to be in the studio still. They got to dance, all of that. And we made it through, there wasn't any, we made it through health-wise. The masks seemed to work pretty well. But Living Arts, my larger gig that I've been really involved with for so long, we went totally virtual for the whole year last year. So I guess when it all started, it was like, okay, 2 weeks shutdown. Let's reassess then. And then it was like, okay, it's going to go on a little bit longer. Let's reassess. Okay. It was like, I had like plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G, I essentially, when the shutdown happened, made multiple plans for all scenarios. What does it look like if we go back in 2 weeks? How are we going to do it in 1 month? Next year, what does it look like as a full year of virtual? Which actually was helpful because we ended up being virtual that whole year, which was difficult for us teachers. It was difficult for the youth, but it was still important to maintain some sort of connection. We kind of broke the year up into 2 chunks. Our season usually starts in October, and it's a shorter 11-week first half of the year. And that was just kind of, let's just be together on screen. Let's see our students, let's recognize what is really going on. I'd say we had more leniency and just kind of wanted to be present in there for the kids and really just focusing on just engaging. Like you said, it was, just getting kids to be there, have their screens on, be present in the room, be engaged and finding joy. Like maybe a lot of the times it was just like, maybe we're just going to have a conversation today. We're not going to dance at all. Because that's what the kids seemed like they needed. Or just allowing freedom to, we kind of threw out, well, it was difficult, as you know, those of you teaching dance virtually, like to have a regular dance class, and we're going to choreograph a dance for our show. And it's like, you know, just turning around, it's like you lose. And then with different age groups, there's also that aspect, right? What does it look like with 4-year-olds online? What does it look like with 7-year-olds? What is it like with our teenagers? So, and let me know if I'm all over the place. I feel like my brain is a little scattered at the moment.
Well, you've both kind of touched on something that I would like to go back to, and it's kind of just how, like, in what ways have you felt maybe your role has had to shift or change? And you've both kind of touched on it already, because Erika mentioned focusing on the mental health of the students. You just mentioned how sometimes you just couldn't dance. You just needed to chat or have a conversation. So yeah, in what ways did you find that you were no longer just a dance teacher and some of your roles had to shift?
I think from the beginning, because, like, you know, speaking with a lot of loss, like Living Arts, we were getting ready for our showcase. Everyone had already purchased their costumes. We were like working on our dances. It was like ready to finish the year, and then cut off. So from that start, and we finished off that first part of the year virtually and just did a little like gathering online to celebrate at the end, but felt the shift right away. I think too, because I've personally been, you know, with a lot of those students for so many years. From, you know, I had I guess more of a, I don't know, let me go back. The role shift right away. And I think in the beginning more so than ever, because everything was so shocking and traumatic, finding that adjustment and then finding joy in movement. So yes, we wanted to make a lot of time to focus on mental health and leave room for discussion and things that aren't necessarily dance, because not everyone wanted to dance, but in the same sense, dancing and moving is that, you know, therapeutic experience in itself. So how does movement look different? And then as well, we're in the house and everyone's in a different home scenario. You know, some people at home don't have, you know, not necessarily might not be able to go on the floor and do work. There might be siblings that they're looking after at the time during class. You know, some people are in really small space, some had larger space. Technology was different for everyone. So, and even as a program, we really had to adjust because we have multiple families that might be taking class with us, or multiple kids within a family. So what does it look like if someone's sharing devices? So there was logistics, there was the mental health, there was adapting movement to being inside. There was still trying to find something to work towards at the end, because what we had been working towards was not going to happen. So I think right away that adapting and throwing out what wasn't relevant in that moment and being okay with that, and focusing on what is necessary for mental and physical well-being. I don't know, Erika, if you want to jump in.
I will agree it was immediate for me as well. However, I've been teaching in the public school setting this is my 14th year. I feel like day one, 2008, when I first walked into my classroom, I discovered that I've also was a therapist in any form of fashion. So that's always been present in my teaching, because you just don't know what is going on outside of the classroom in these children's lives. But I felt like that position became more relevant during the pandemic, because what children aren't really understanding or have something that they have to learn throughout their life is empathy. They don't have that naturally. So they have to learn, they have to practice, they have to watch other people to understand and relate to certain things. So it was a lot of my kids coming to me saying, well, this teacher doesn't care about me. This teacher is ignoring when I message her. And I had to, I had to really step back and say, well, why do you feel this way? Why do you feel like this teacher doesn't do this? They're giving us work every day. And I'm like, well, if you were in the building, would you have work every day? It wouldn't be this much. Are you sure? Or are you frustrated with the situation and not realizing that this adult still has other responsibilities that they have to keep up with, and make sure you are still at the same level that you would have been when you go to the next grade? And I always inform them, unfortunately with DPS CD, we are the largest district, but we are not funded the same. We're the largest district, but we also have the less funding. So we're combating with a lot of things that you would not see in the suburbs. And you have to acknowledge that a lot of these teachers here that work here are doing so much behind the scenes that you don't understand. And just really having those, unfortunately, they had to grow up very quickly in this pandemic, and I had to simply guide them along. So there was times when we would come to class and they would just be like, I'm just too exhausted, I'm frustrated. I would have no cameras on. And I would just be like, hey guys, what's going on? And like the microphone would just burst open, the chat line would just be hitting, like, we're exhausted, we can't do this, we can't do that. And we have to start learning about routines and practice. Like, how do you start your first class off? If it's not dance, because I make you get up, how do you start your first class off in the day? Oh, in bed. When do you wake up and brush your teeth or grab your first meal? I don't know, not until 2 o'clock. Okay, what time did you go to sleep last night? 5 in the morning. Okay, like, whoa. Like there was a lot of that, of them also during that time, because again, we're dealing with a different economic class, we're different with a different culture here than most people are understanding. So my parents don't work a 9 to 5, or if a person is a stay-at-home mother, she's not a stay-at-home mother because she really wanted to stay with the kids. It may be for savings or anything of that nature. They just don't have the money for daycare. So things of that nature applies in my district, in my community. So we'll have a lot of parents not with the kids. They'll be at work during the time that they would simply be in school. So a lot of these kids were free to do whatever they had, and they were missing that structure and stability that they would get within a school setting. And we had to, myself as well, I had to be more empathetic with them as well. I had to step back and realize what was going on at home. If certain things were like, as she spoke, there's multiple kids on a laptop at one time. So you can't just on the floor because you're interrupting 2 or 3 other students, or maybe there's nowhere in the house for them to move or perform. So I had to maneuver and adjust my schedule constantly to make sure that I was giving them the attention that they were not receiving, due to the fact that from 8 until 7 or 2 until 12, they were in the house by themselves with no parental supervision, and they were able and free to do whatever they wanted to. And then they would feel overwhelmed. They would get overwhelmed immediately because they had that freedom. They were on social media all day long, and now it's time to actually do their work, but it's due at 11:59 and now it's 11:58. So so really making sure that I had that time to have them just sit down and just vent, just call all the teachers in this building, every name except the one they were given, and just not take offense to it, because they were just simply frustrated because we were asking kids to grow up during a pandemic without any guidance, any role models to show them actually how to do it.
You've both kind of talked about this a little bit too, so we can probably do this one relatively quickly. But I did not have to experience the technology issues that it sounds like you're both mentioning, because my institution had the means to have a loan program where anyone who did not have a phone, laptop, tablet, they could rent one for free from the university. So everybody had the means to go virtual. How did your institutions handle that? Did they not handle it? Did they just kind of expect everybody to be able to go virtual? Like, how did that kind of go for everyone? Because I mean, I would imagine not everyone has a laptop.
How did it go? I guess there was the aspect of students as well as teachers. With our teaching artists, you know, their ages range, you know, we're in our 20s, 30s, 20s to 50s, you know, so with some teachers, it was a whole new learning experience. Like this is like using Zoom, using music on your computer. Like, you know, some teachers that were more comfortable just had been used to just using CDs up until now. So making sure the sound was right, making sure that every teaching artist knew how to properly use Zoom, and even with all the communicating and everything else. So that we had to prepare. There was a lot of time spent just kind of virtually troubleshooting with the teaching artists, making sure that they were set up before we really were virtual. And then we had a very tiny little budget, you know, to help with some things, but like I played music we had either myself or my colleague would sit in the class, like with camera off. So for each class, there was one of us there, just in case something went wrong with the tech. In one class, I ended up, you know, I was DJ. So I was doing the music and sharing sound throughout the whole year because this person was using their phone. With students, we did not have any means to provide them with technology, unfortunately. There only was maybe one out of everyone that didn't have any way to do class with us, unfortunately. But, and that was, you know, that's something we talked about in the beginning, right? Because we can't assume that everyone has a computer at home or smartphones, but I guess maybe it is a little bit more common now, at least with the smartphones. But yeah, it worked out. And we did talk about how are we able to provide technology, but unfortunately we weren't able to, but it worked out. And I think with our scheduling, you know, we had to condense our schedule and just do less to make sure that everyone could be on.
Let's just give a quick moment to CDs. Like to hear that some teachers were still using CDs. That's awesome. I just needed to give that a moment.
Bringing your own stereo to class.
Awesome.
DPS received a grant, a nice amount of funding. I forget where, to supply our students with, they're not tablets, I think they're called tablets. However, what the issue that we were confronted with was that I think people really think this is a technology savvy generation, and they're not. They needed a lot of assistance with the basics, like simply turning them on was a very difficult task for them because they are so used to their smartphones. But their smartphones are not equipped for them to do like full assignments on. I don't know if anyone's ever tried to write a paper on a smartphone. It's excruciating. But I had kids who were trying to do that because they were more familiar with their cell phones than they were with these tablets. They weren't very familiar with a keyboard. That was a hard task to learn. So I think the first month of virtual education, when we came back in the fall, I spent the majority of my class teaching them how to use their tablets. I had several of them send me a screenshot because I would ask them what type of tablet it was, and they weren't able to tell me. So I sent them screenshots of their tablets. I was able to find YouTube videos to play during class of how they were to turn it on, how they were to access things, how they were to turn on the Wi-Fi, how they were to switch from the front to back camera. And then we spent another week working the online platform where their assignments was, how to find it on their Clever, a lot of those things. I kind of went into it knowing that they didn't know this stuff, but I think a lot of educators was just surprised. They're like, oh my God, they know how to make, I remember one teacher saying they know how to make a TikTok. How do they not know how to work a tablet? Like, because they don't have tablets, they have cell phones and things of that nature. And they rarely use a keyboard at all, to be honest. You know what I mean? When they're yes, there's a keyboard on their phone, but you type with your thumbs, not with, 10 of your fingers. So it was a lot of, so I think that's when I was like, at that point, when we first we're starting to figure out how to turn on their tablets and operate them, that's when I was like, I'm going to need a lot of patience for the rest of this year to get through it and to have patience for them, because the things that I expected for them to know was something that I made up in my own mind. It was it wasn't true. So, but we were able to supply them with tablets. They did unfortunately break some. They didn't know how to use them, but and some came to them broken. I'm not really, but again, I don't really know if they did or didn't, or if they just weren't equipped to use them. So, but we were able to supply any children who needed one a tablet.
Patience. What a great lesson learned out of the last 18 months was patience. And working off of that, Marianne kind of mentioned this slightly. You just kind of had to throw some stuff out the window and reconfigure. I want to talk more about that. Like, you know, after kind of figuring out, you know, this no longer works in this setting, and, you know, what has changed for you as a dance educator? Like, is there something that's just no longer important that you think you can just start to slowly take away from your practice? How do you, and just moving forward, how do you see your teaching practice? Yeah, and feel free to also throw in, like, I made mistakes, and through those mistakes is how I learned, like, you know, the changes in my practice. I'm sure we all made a lot of mistakes the last 18 months.
Funny, and the mistakes, I think it was more of like we're just continuously learning. And we were very green going into this. And I feel like we all know a lot more now. Patience was a huge thing, and just learning to listen more and be more observant, even more so. Any mistakes? I think adjusting our expectations for the reality that we're in. And I know with like the setting I'm teaching in comparison to Erika teaching in the public school systems, there are different expectations with our different organizations. We might have had a little more freedom in my program to kind of adapt things, and yeah, there are less, you know, we're not trying to help kids graduate per se. It's so the expectations were different with that, but yeah, listening, providing the space, having patience. One thing that was cool about, we kind of all of us teachers realized because we did a lot of discussions and a lot of collaborative planning throughout the whole process with our teachers and with administrators. It kind of opened it up to do things that we didn't always have time to do in class regularly, when we were just, you know, working on technique and working on our dances and getting ready for the show, and always just kind of never having enough time to just go through the motions and do what we always do. It's like, oh, now we have time to talk about history and context and add that discussion element, which doesn't happen. And actually it complemented this virtual class better because movement wasn't necessarily as compatible. So kind of looking at how can we make this the fullest experience as we can, even though things look so different. So I think being able to incorporate more conversation and discussion, and even including videos, and because I feel like that's a big thing that is missing a lot of the times in just traditional studio settings is context and the history and stuff of what you're teaching, because we're always just never have enough time to do what we have planned to even get through a full class. So kind of slowing down, that was cool, and I'm hoping we can kind of incorporate some of that still. I know when we go back to in-person, and even with the one organization where I am going back, we're still not fully back in person. our classes are still kind of modified. We're still, you know, worried that, are we going to have to change again? Like it's not totally back to normal. And I'm hoping by January we can at least like have a regular class schedule and provide different things and different styles, and but still maintain. How can we take what was good and positive from this experience and incorporate it now into our classes? And just being adaptable. I mean, which as artists, you know, that's kind of just already within us, but even more so. And then I guess embodying, what are we embodying this year? Still the same thing. Just getting back, because these kids have been out of the studio for over a year. So there's just like the physical aspect, like where are our bodies at? Where is our physicality, our strength, our flexibility, our stamina? I know personally I've been sitting a lot and have lost a ton of muscle. Like it feels different being back in the studio and moving again. So focusing on that and still focusing on what's important and letting go of things that we might not need at this moment, because we're waiting for this moment for it to just be back to normal. Okay, now we can go back and everything is in, and we're not there yet. And we don't know what's going to be around the corner. Are we going to have to throw it all away again and come up with something new? So adaptability.
I'm gonna keep this short and sweet, because that's what I've learned. Keep it short, sweet, and push on to the next thing. Don't drag it out. Not to sweat the little things. At the end of the day, they're children. And I have bigger kids, but they're still kids, and let them be kids. That's one thing that I discovered they were not allowed to be. We're just let them be kids. Let them be silly when they need to be silly. Let them have a moment just to be themselves. This is an art. I'm so sorry. I don't know what that noise is. It's creepy. I'm at work and now that noise is happening. Anyway, if there's a shadow behind me, y'all would tell me, right? Let them be kids. Don't sweat the little things. And I have the ability to create a space where the kids feel open and welcome, and to make sure that every time they walk into my classroom, that space is available to them to feel open without any punishment for being their authentic self and saying what's truly on their mind, even though my kids have the vocabulary to be very brutal. But again, not allowing that to feel like an attack on me, but just for them to have that release and be completely vulnerable with me at times.
Can I jump in really quick? Just some
please.
Togetherness. So just Erika kind of made me think of this. That's another thing going ahead. And I know in the studio, it's like training, technique, this, it's like, let's just be together and enjoy dance and dance for joy and for release and just being with one another, because we have been isolated. And I think that's what was also important when we were teaching virtually, giving the students time to just interact with each other. Because I think I asked them a few times about like, what was your day like during the day in virtual school? And it's like, is there any time to interact with your peers, even though you are virtual? And there wasn't enough of that, it seemed, from what I was hearing. So kind of continuing on with that in whatever format we are class-wise, but really saving space for that. Just being together is like enough at this moment.
Well, I am learning that you are both awesome and wonderful, wonderful educators. Thank you for all of this sharing so far. We are gonna shift into the group discussion. We've got like more questions to pose and all of that, but I'm gonna pass it to Audrey. She's just gonna discuss a little bit of detail first.
Yeah. How are we doing, everyone, bodies? Do we want to take like a 2-minute break from screen, or maybe just like a collective breath together and carry forward. So move your hand if you want to take an actual like 2-minute break, and don't move your hand if you don't want to take a break. I see one hand. Okay, let's take a 2.5. Let's take a time. So it's the 30 right now. So we'll come back at like the 33. So yeah, do a journey for your bodies, take some breaths, and then we'll share as a group. We got some sound. Okay. All right. It was nice to take a moment for me. So I hope everyone had a nice little moment away from the screen. And as we come back, we're going to enter into some group discussion. So we just spent some time listening to what Marianne and what Erika had to share. And I'm sure our thoughts are kind of still integrating and making connections, or maybe even having questions. So this is the space for us all to speak. So if you want to have your videos on, you're so welcome to do that. And again, if having them off is where we're at right now, that's also cool too. But this is a space for us all to speak. And the format will be pretty similar to the panelists section. We'll offer a question, and then anyone can share a response or thought to the room, and we'll utilize the chat to sign up to speak. So we ask that you just throw your name in, or even just like me in the chat if you would like to share, and then I think Maddie will call on folks to go. But before we even do that, before we get into questions, I want us all to take a moment and think about for yourself, what is at the top of your mind? What is sort of simmering, floating to the top after listening to the discussion? And if there are 3 words that have come up for you that you would like to share, go ahead and put those in the chat or briefly unmute to share those words. So we're thinking about what's at the top, what's floating up. You can put that in the chat or share to the group, and you don't need to sign up to speak, sort of free unmute if that's your style.
Release.
That's renewal. An unknown.
Dominic says patience and grace in the chat. M says authenticity. Audrey says honesty.
And if other things come up, little comments, feel free to throw them in the chat. Yeah, I'm feeling patience and grace, authenticity, honesty, unknown, release, all of that. So thanks for those words, y'all. I'm gonna pass it back to Tree. We'll start us off with our first question to the group.
Yeah, and also just reiterate that if anyone has any stories to share or experiences to share on anything that we have already talked about that you want to express as well, please do so. Or if you have a question in your brain that you want to pose to the group that we haven't already talked about and may not mention now, please do that as well. I mean, all is valid. We want to hear anything anyone has to say, please. So with these words in our forefront, I mean, something we have been really talking about the role of the educator and the teacher in all of this. So as people who have been taking dance classes over the past year, potentially virtually or in person, I guess the first question is just kind of what have those experiences been? Has there been some positivity within it, challenges within it? Has anyone experienced taking classes in the last 18 months? And again, feel free to unmute and just come out and speak, or I'm sorry, put your name in the chat and we'll call, or you can just type everything right in the chat. And again, Maddie will read whatever pops into there. So either method.
Speaking about virtual classes in particular.
Yeah, seems like we had an audio lag. Thank you, Audrey, for putting that question in the chat. Oh, you can go ahead. If you like.
Yeah, go ahead.
My bad. I forgot about put your names in there. I was. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Em. All right, I'm gonna go. So I don't really teach much, but I did take some online classes, and I think it, like being in an online Zoom dance class really had me thinking about, or like it sort of revealed to me in its absence, the thing that I especially like value about my dance practice, which it turns out is being in the same room with other people. And it just was like funny, or it wasn't funny, but like to having, like every time I was in a class or a rehearsal, being in a room with other people and then being in my room on the computer, I was like, oh yeah, this is sort of, for me at least, like a pretty integral part to like my like my like excitement about being a movement artist and like dancer. So that was sort of a thing, and like having to sort of like mourn the, you know, like temporary loss of this in-person space was was like an experience, I guess. And but it was fun. Like I didn't really realize that was so important to me until I like couldn't go to the studio with people anymore. So that was sort of like, in its absence, it showed me something. Teresa, want to go ahead?
For me, it was really hard connecting. Not only, I mean, obviously there was no connection to anyone else because I was in my own space, in my own home by myself, but I couldn't even connect to myself in the way that I would like to or would normally do. Because it's, you know, I would do a twirl to my left and I'd be staring at all the dishes in the sink that needed to get done. And suddenly that's all I could focus on. And then I'd do a kick to my right. And then suddenly the dog was licking my leg. And like, I just, you know, there's just so many distractions where when you walk into the studio, there's that presence where like, this is where I'm at. This is where I do the work or whatever. And when I'm in my home, it's like, no, this is where I clean. This is where I cook. This is where I feed the dog. This is where I, you know, and so I just couldn't connect and it became very unmotivating. And I gave up, to be quite honest.
Red.
I will say for myself, I enjoyed how I didn't have to travel there. To put it on a positive note, but it was difficult to disconnect from my living space into the studio space. I would find myself easily distracted. Not to be a disrespectful student, but I would find myself getting up and leaving the room and maybe grabbing a water in my refrigerator. It was very difficult to stay within the moment for me. But it was also amazing to see how as artists, we adapted so quickly to what was happening and just how resilient we were. So I wanted to support everybody and I wanted to be involved in the space with them, but being in my living quarters where I do eat, sleep, and that is where I also have it's also my personal, my safe space as well, my safe haven. So also inviting people in was a little anxiety driven for me. I would make sure like, oh shoot, let me put this up, let me clean. So I was never involved in the moment because I also knew there was watching eyes. And I don't think people were just also looking in the boxes like, oh, her house dirty. But that's where my mind went constantly. So I was always in a moment like, oh, there's a sock on the floor. Let me kick it out away before someone see it. And I can never just be completely in tune to the class.
Audrey, before you speak, I'm going to read some thoughts that have popped up in the chat. So here's some from Carlos. Rediscovery of yourself and intention. How do you realign a sense of purpose and practice? Let students discover a sense of play. What is technique? Good question. And then PTSD and loss of a year of dance for teaching and creating, yet there was a space for thinking and planning on how to come out of this and thrive. And then thoughts from Teresa. Yes, invasion of your safe space, not being able to separate work from relaxation. Audrey?
Yeah. Yes to what everyone has shared thus far, and I can keep my reflection brief, but I think as both teaching classes and taking some type of class and teaching myself class to just be in my body in the past year and a half, I have noticed in classes and also in rehearsals, like it's been interesting to feel a little bit more actually agency in how I'm showing up to dance spaces. And I think more so in some rehearsal processes lately, I've noticed in myself, there's more, like they're more at the surface of like how I really feel about the creative choices, or like if I'm not into what's happening, I'm more able to say no or to say like what I want to happen. And I think it's been interesting to feel this like sort of obedient dancer who's in the space. It's like, okay, like I'm gonna make it happen, or I'll push down my feelings of like, this isn't what I would do creatively, but like this is just what they want kind of thing. I've been able to actually hear those feelings and have space for them. So I don't know, I'm having this realization that there's something to this time of like being in my home, but also just being with myself and self-growth that like I've been feeling more autonomy as a creative collaborator, even more so in this time. So I hope that continues. That's a change that I would like to stick.
Please continue to share thoughts and nuggets of information. But yeah, just kind of going off of that, like, did anybody else find maybe some inspiration in this time of being home or working less or whatever the last 18 months was for you? Finding some extra inspiration, or not, you could say the opposite. Just since I'm unmuted, I'll say Marianne.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, everyone. I agree with, I guess this year was a little different for me because I also have an administrative role. So I never stopped working, and it almost picked up a little bit in the beginning, and there was a lot of stress, work-related stress. So I don't feel like I had the time initially to kind of I didn't have free time to kind of just dig back into my own creative practice. And I did experience a lot of just anxiety and stress in the very beginning, even like, well, I have a job, like when this first started, you know, like, what are we going to do for work? So the stress and anxiety kind of took over, and I agree, it was very difficult to be motivated personally. Like the house was just a mess for a whole year because I lost all ambition to do anything. I think that even just, I'm a social person, even just losing that, like, let's go grab drinks, you know, like just that casual, just being with people, and being with people dancing in the same space. It was, in the beginning, I thought, oh, I'm going to do so much. And then I didn't do really anything. But I mean, for myself, I was focusing on work and the youth, you know, that was kind of a lot of the priorities. But kind of bouncing off what Carlos said, let's see. Allows your dance teaching, creating a space, or thinking of planning on how to come out of this and thrive. That was something that kind of stuck with me throughout it all. Like, well, this year sucks, but what can we do? How can we come out of this with maybe some new skills or new insight, or like, what can we gain from this and come out of it with more than when we left off? And I don't know if I can answer that yet, but that was kind of something that stuck with me.
Red?
I think the biggest thing for me is to be kinder to myself and my body. I feel like as I hate saying struggling, because I'm not really struggling, but as a artist in general, an artist that produces constantly, I'm always I'm always preparing for the next project, and I'm never having any downtime to just be myself, to be Erika and not Red the artist. So this was a great like reset for me. to really make sure that I take those moments to enjoy just being Erika and doing things that Erika loves, and not trying to be current constantly and going for the next project and the project after that and the project after that and the project after that. I even stopped doing that with my kids, because usually I'm coming in like, okay, we got to get ready for the Christmas concert. We got to get ready for the Harvest Festival. When they contacted me for the Harvest Festival, I was like, we're not doing that. We're going to do the Christmas concert. We're going to do Black History, and we're going to do the spring concert. And we're not going to just constantly be producing for producing sake. There's going to be time to really think about this, really building your craft, and really realize where your artistry lives. Because my kids create their own movements and their own styles as well. And I want them to have their own aesthetic throughout this, and not just think like the hustle and bustle is normal, because in this, it is for us, but should it be? Like, I don't know. It needs to be some form of more consistency with it, to not feel like you have to produce to stay current or consistent, or run and do the next grant to be able to live. And I really took those moments, and I was thankful that, you know, I did have a job. You know, I know this is not, I know I had a privilege here to have a job that was paying me, but I was just thankful to be able to rest and really sit there and prepare myself for the next project, and really think in depth, like, what is Red? What is the next steps for Red Wall? What do I want to create? What is the process for the company? And how can I actually achieve those goals?
We have some Teresa in the chat. That's beautiful. Short affirmation. It is in response to you, Erika. Would you like to go ahead and speak?
Sure, that really was beautiful. Again, I'm not a professional dancer, but I will say, and I feel like y'all will be able to relate to this, the times that I really need to be focusing on getting back in my body are the times I'm usually the most out of it, and not doing my practices, not taking walks, not grounding. And during the pandemic, you know, without some type of grounding, it's been very difficult. So I was just going to share, I kind of forgot the question, so this may feel like an aside, but I don't mean it to be. Midway through the pandemic, I was working in tech support from home. So I transitioned from being in person to going home for a bit, which was a huge privilege. But I started having some out of body experiences, just like having headphones on all day, and just like, I know I'm not the only one. That's why I'm being so candid about this, just feeling like so out of touch and not present. And people would be like, rub your feet on the ground or things like that. And I'd start to freak out. And I remember I had a really hard week, and a friend of mine came over, and she brought yarn and a crochet needle, and she was like, I'm just going to teach you how to do this. And that practice like has helped me get through that period of time, because I was just getting back into my body in one way or another. And so when we talk about learning new things, even that aren't dance related, but sewing or just working with your hands in one way or another, I do think that can be very healing, especially with us trying to adjust and readjust in any way we can. So that's all I have to share. Thanks for letting me be here.
Thank you, everyone, so far. With the time that we have left, we're going to shift to a checkout that Audrey's going to lead us. And it is technically another question, but it'll be short, and you can just put it in the chat like all the others. But Audrey, please.
Yeah, just again, thanks everyone for sharing such candid and honest and really thoughtful things to this discussion space. And so kind of coming through all that, we're going to check out sort of how we entered the discussion space. And again, what are you taking with you? What are you simmering with? Coming back to that question. So how about we actually take a moment to, if you want to close your eyes, you can close your eyes. If you want to keep them open, just maybe looking away from the screen to feel connection to something else. And as you're taking your breaths, allowing yourself to think about what's simmering, maybe what you want to take with you. And when you're feeling ready to share any of that, you can kind of come back to the screen with eyes open and share. Maybe it's a movement gesture. Maybe it's 3 words again in the chat. Maybe you want to unmute and say a sentence or a feeling, a thought, a texture, anything like that. So a bit open. And we can use the chat. We can use our voice. What are you simmering with?
I think, oh, yeah, I think I'm just super grateful to be able to
I think you got muted again, Dominic.
okay, am I back?
Yeah.
Okay. I was just saying I'm just super grateful to be able to listen and be in conversation with other dancers and practitioners, because I didn't spend a lot of time doing that, because in the transitional phase I had during the pandemic, I was doing 500 things at once. And I'm just super happy I was just able to witness and hear other people's experiences, because I completely stopped dance in so many different ways. And I'm just now getting back into it. But I think that moving forward, instead of just because I'm not practicing, doesn't mean I can't still be in conversation. So I'm just super grateful and happy I was able to land on this one today, because I didn't talk about dance during the pandemic. I was doing so many other things, but I think it's important because it puts things more into context and perspective when I hear others.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And maybe I'll read what's in the chat. Tree right, shifting to what is relevant. Ashe, reconnecting to dance movement on a personal level. Though we may need to hold space for other people, we also can, should, must hold space for ourselves. A little bit more time if you want to throw anything into the chat or share by voice. Carlos writes, I am sitting with letting go of frustration and ready to create. I think the sense of touch is what many have missed. Dancing, yes. As a contact improv enthusiast, it's been greatly missed greatly. Excuse me. Long transition, yeah. All right. Well, thanks for sharing these kind of checkout thoughts, and just want to offer for a moment one more time for us to take a couple group breaths. So again, if you want to come back to your bodies, close your eyes if that feels good, keep them open if that feels good, and we'll just breathe together. So breathing in, nice and easy, and then letting it go, letting your breath pour back to the earth. And we'll do that one more time, filling your body with air, breathing in. And then exhale, letting the earth catch your breath. And one more time on your own. All right. Thanks, y'all. I'm going to pass it over to Maddie, and they are going to give us some checkout last thoughts.
Yes, thank you again, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you, Erika and Marianne. I am just going to tell you that, what am I going to tell you? I'm going to tell you that dance forums are a free program of ours. And if you have the means and the interest, you can support CSD and support our Dance Forum program. I'm going to put a Give Butter link in the chat, and then also a link to Erika's company info if you want to follow along with that. And if anyone would like to get in contact with Marianne, you can email us and we can facilitate that. We're going to have a slow fall and winter, so you probably won't hear much from CSD, but you can always follow us on Instagram, Collective Sweat Detroit, Facebook, the whole thing. And we hope to see you all soon, somewhere, somehow.